Good day, good people, and welcome to Revolutionary Belovedness. I'm Robert Farrell, and whether you are here for the live session or watching the recording, thank you so much for being with us this evening. If you will, let me know in the chat section that you can hear me okay, and also know that the chat section remains open for the whole time, so if at any time you have something you would like to share, whether it's a reflection or an echo or anything at all, a question, feel free to use the chat section. I see we have a couple of new people here for the first time in a live session, so thank you so much for joining. Typically what we do is we take just a little bit of time to center. I will share a reflection on our topic tonight, learning to stay present in conflict, practicing emotional regulation and grounded presence when tension arises. Then we'll have time for a guided meditation, a guided inquiry. And then a little bit of time just to explore some questions that you can take with you after the session to deepen what you may have encountered this evening. Again, the chat section remains open, so feel free to use it at any time. Let's begin with the breath. Allow this moment to be exactly what it is. Feel the chair beneath you, the ground beneath your feet, and the quiet weight of your body at rest in the chair or the floor. Take one full breath and let your shoulders soften with it. Then take another and notice the simple fact of being here, alive, breathing, present. Friends, conflict lives in the body long before it surfaces in words, and presence begins here in the reclamation of this breath. So breathe in slowly and fully. As the air fills your lungs, receive the breath as a practice, a small and sacred act, and breathe out with equal care. And let this short moment of stillness remind you that your body is capable of staying open even when the world around it tightens. Let this place of rest be where you are grounded as you listen. Friends, the body knows conflict before the mind does. You know, that tightening in the chest, the sudden sharpening of awareness, the way the breath grows shallow and quick. These are the body's ancient signals written into our nervous system long before language developed words to name them. Conflict activates something primal, something that reads tension as threat and responds accordingly, contracting around itself in preparation for what may come. And this is what the contemplative tradition recognizes as the reactive first response, the self-protective impulse that arrives before compassion has a chance to breathe. And what tonight's session asks us to explore is a practice at once simple and profound, learning to stay present when conflict arises. And that means remaining in the room emotionally and spiritually when every defended layer of the smaller self urges retreat or counterattack. Friends, presence in the midst of conflict is one of the most demanding forms of love available to human beings. It asks us to hold our ground inwardly while remaining open to the other, to feel the weight of tension and allow that weight to be held rather than expelled, transformed rather than ignored. That capacity to hold tension has a bodily home, and Valerie Kaur names it with precision, the practice of breathe. And as she understands it, is both literal and metaphorical. When conflict arises, the breath is almost always the first casualty. It shortens, it quickens, it becomes a holding pattern rather than a flow. And the body, reading danger, pulls inward, and with the breath pulled in, the capacity for full presence narrows with it. You probably don't have to remember too far back when that has happened. One remains physically in the room while something essential has already begun to retreat. The deeper self displaced by the false self scanning for threat and calculating its response. So breathing consciously in the middle of conflict is a radical act. It is a refusal to let the body's first alarm signal become the final word on how one shows up. A slow, full breath taken in the midst of rising tension is an act of reclamation, a way of affirming that love and awareness remain accessible, that the ground beneath the conflict is wider than the conflict itself. The act of breathing creates space to think more clearly, to see more truthfully, to resist the narrowing that fear and anger naturally produce. So a breath taken in the middle of difficulty is a small and potent act of revolutionary love for oneself. And it is the foundation upon which genuine presence for others becomes possible. So take a breath now. Friends, when words sharpen and disagreement intensifies, the invitation to breathe can seem almost absurdly modest. And therein lies its wisdom. It's small enough to be accessible in almost any moment of friction. Breath is precisely what keeps the door open between reaction and response, between the contracted self and the more spacious awareness that the contemplative tradition calls the second gaze. By the way, if you want to read more in depth about the second gaze, there is a post available on the Mighty Network that you can find. It's actually in the events section for this series of events. This is precisely where the contemplative tradition offers its deepest guidance. Richard Rohr's teaching on the first gaze and the second gaze illuminates what is truly at stake when conflict arises. You see, the first gaze is the reactive one. It arrives fast, weighted with defensiveness and self-concern, asking how this situation affects me, how my sense of self demands that I respond, how I can restore control of what has been disrupted. And the first gaze is understandable, even innocent in its way. It is simply the default mode of the unexamined self, the contracted place where most of us begin. But the second gaze is something entirely different. And it is something else entirely. It is the gaze of compassion, of openness, of genuine presence to what is actually happening beyond one's own defended perimeter. Arriving at the second gaze is rarely immediate. It requires practice, and it almost always requires a pause. Breath is precisely that pause. Take a breath now. And what the second gaze reveals, slowly and through sustained practice, is that staying present in conflict is, at its deepest level, a practice of nonviolence directed inward. The impulse to flee, to shut down, or to strike back is understandable and deeply human. It is the nervous system doing exactly what it is designed to do. What the contemplative path asks, and what revolutionary love requires, is the cultivation of another possibility. The capacity to remain with what is difficult long enough for something more truthful to emerge. And this is what it means to hold tension rather than resolve it prematurely. To allow the discomfort of a hard conversation to become a threshold rather than a wall, and to trust that what's on the other side of one's own reactivity is worth the cost of remaining. And friends, the body is the site of this work. Take a breath now. You see, love that remains only in the realm of intention and concept does very little when tensions rise in a real conversation with a real person. Love must have a home in the body precisely because it is the first place conflict lands and the last place from which grounded presence is recovered. This is a form of sacred stewardship. The capacity to remain present under pressure is directly related to the degree to which one has cultivated a regular relationship with one's own inner state. Learn to recognize the signs of contraction, to soften around them, and to return again and again to that wider ground that lies beneath them. And this work is always wider than the solitary self. There is something in shared spiritual life that can hold what individuals struggle to hold alone. And one of the most profound gifts a community can offer is the steadiness of members who remain present when the pull toward withdrawal is strongest. You see, when one person contracts under the pressure of conflict, the grounded presence of others becomes a kind of anchor, a reminder that love is still available here, that the moment can be survived and even transformed by those who choose to stay. And that steadiness in community grows from the same source as personal steadiness, regular, intentional practice undertaken before the hard moment arrives. And the great spiritual traditions converge in their shared insistence that the capacity for grounded presence under pressure must be cultivated in quieter times, because conflict itself rarely provides the conditions for preparation, and formation is always happening either by intention or by default. But those who have learned to remain present with themselves in stillness, to sit with discomfort rather than flee it, carry the same capacity into the harder terrain of relational conflict, meeting it with a spaciousness that practice alone can build. And this is why presence in conflict is understood here as a practice of love, and love of a particularly mature and courageous kind, because it is the love that remains in the room. It is the love that continues to breathe even when breath feels risky. It is the love that trusts, over time and through accumulated practice, that remaining open is more generative than closing down, that the second gaze is worth waiting for, that what lies on the other side of one's first reactive impulse is something worth discovering together. And so, friends, the invitation of tonight's session is to bring these reflections into lived experience. Consider the conflicts, large and small, that arise in ordinary life. A conversation that sharpens unexpectedly. A moment of disagreement that spreads heat through the chest. A relational tension that seems to ask for more than one feels able to give. In all of these, the breath remains available. The pause remains available. Take a breath now. The second gaze, though it may arrive slowly and imperfectly, remains available. And each time one chooses presence over retreat, something in the soul grows slightly more capable, slightly more spacious, slightly more aligned with the love one is learning to become. Yeah, revolutionary love is formed in exactly these ordinary moments of grounded, breathing presence. And the world is changed through large acts of courage, and it is also changed through the accumulated weight of small ones. The breath taken before the reactive word. The pause that keeps the door open. The body that chooses to stay when every defended instinct says to leave. This is the labor of love that has always been asked of those who seek to be instruments of healing in a fractured world. Breathe. Breath. Stay. Remain present. This is enough. This, in fact, is everything. Before we move into our guided inquiry together, let's just take a few minutes to breathe into the silence together. Take a moment now and feel the weight of your body where it rests right now. The weight of the seat beneath you, the particular warmth of your hands folded or resting wherever they've landed, the contact of your feet with the floor. Take a breath, slow and full, and let it move all the way through you. Notice how it enters, how it expands the ribs and chest, how it releases. Take another and let this one travel a little deeper. The body is already here, already breathing, already holding something that this practice will draw forward. Let your attention gather in the chest. You can place a hand there if that feels natural. Notice the rise and fall beneath your palm. This is where conflict often arrives first, as tightening, as a gathering of heat, as a subtle drawing inward, and that happens before any word is spoken. The body knows before the mind does. It keeps its own record. Now, call to mind a moment when you felt that. A conversation that sharpened unexpectedly, or a silence charged with what was left unsaid, a disagreement that put heat in your throat or on your face, a moment when something in you wanted to leave the room, to say the sharp thing or to go perfectly still. And let that memory arrive as it is. Just simply notice where it lands in the body now, in this quieter moment, with a little distance between you and it. Where does it live? Perhaps in the jaw or the shoulders, or lower in the belly or hips. Spend a moment locating it, its texture, its weight, the particular quality of its presence. The body carries every difficult encounter as living information, as the record of what was survived and what remained unfinished. What is this memory asking you to notice? Breathe into that. A slow, full breath directed toward the place where the tension lives. And notice what the breath does when it arrives there. The tightening may ease only slightly, or it may hold its ground entirely. Allow whatever is true to be true. Be there with it. Choose to remain present with what is difficult. To stay with the sensation rather than moving away from it. This is the practice in its most essential form. It begins right here, in this body, in this breath. Good. Now ask yourself, in that moment that you recalled, what did you most want? What did you most want? Sit with the question gently. What was the deeper longing beneath the tension? Perhaps to be heard, to feel safe, to hold the connection even as the difficulty rose between you and another. What would it have meant to take one slow breath before responding? What might have opened in that small pause? And notice what the body does as you hold these questions. Is there a softening anywhere? A small release in the breath, a slight easing in the chest or shoulders? Just let the body's response be its own answer. This practice asks, what is the ground that holds even the conflict? What is wider than the difficulty, steadier than the reactive moment? Breathe there, in the wideness. And let us return to the silence again for just a couple of minutes. Breathing in, staying open. Breathing out, wide enough to hold. Breathing in, staying open. Breathing out, wide enough to hold. Friends, let the body's record be honored, releasing its claim for today. You have offered attention. You have practiced presence. That is the labor of love this session is asking of us. And whenever you are ready, allow that memory to soften, returning to its place in you, its claim released for now. Gently and slowly widen your awareness. Notice the room around you, the quality of light, the sounds, the ground beneath your feet once more. And take one final full breath. And as you release it, extend a quiet wish toward yourself and toward every person who has ever stood in a hard moment and found a way, however imperfect, to keep breathing and to remain. May you be held, may you be at ease, and may you find the ground again and again. Thank you all for sharing in that time of guided inquiry. Our sessions come to a close each time. I offer 4 questions for deeper reflection, for guided dialogue, if you like. I'm just going to go through them one at a time. If one of them speaks to you in this moment and you would like to share anything at all, you can do so in the chat. It still is open. The first one is, where in your body do you first feel the impact of conflict? The tightening, the heat, the impulse to leave or to speak sharply. And what has this physical signal taught you over time about what you most need in a moment of tension? Next, when you recall a moment when you have found a way to stay present in a difficult conversation rather than retreating or reacting, what made that possible? And what does that experience reveal about the interior or relational conditions that grounded presence requires? Next, breathing is understood here tonight as both a personal and a political act, a way of asserting the body's worth and sustaining its capacity for love even under pressure. So how does this broader understanding shift the way you approach emotional regulation in moments of conflict? And again, next, the contemplative tradition speaks of a first gaze, the reactive and self-protective response, and it speaks of a second gaze, the compassionate and open one. So what practices cultivated in ordinary time help you move from the first to the second? And what would it mean to tend to those practices more intentionally as preparation for the harder encounters life places before you? So if anyone has anything they would like to share, they can certainly do that. While you're pondering that or typing, I just Want to again remind you that these questions will be available on the Mighty Network, where the recordings for these sessions are posted, which is within the event section. You have to do a little looking around, but you'll see it there. And you can respond to those questions online, or you can just take them yourselves and journal in your own space, however that works for you. It's always or often is nice to interact with others around these questions. There you will find the recordings. All these sessions are recorded and available on the Mighty Network. They're also available on YouTube, so you can look there as well. And as always, whether you were here for the live session or watching the recording, thank you for being part of our small community. It's very great to have you with us in whatever capacity works for you. We're very, very grateful for that. And with that, friends, I will wish you a wonderful evening. Thank you again for being here. Good night for now.